This is Mark Guerrero, East L.A. Music Stories, episode 18. And my guest is Mike Aversa, who was in the 60s. He had a very popular band in East L.A. called Mickey and the Invaders. And later, they evolved into a group called Dyna-Might, D-Y-N-A hyphen M-I-G-H-T, who did a couple of singles for Uni MCA Records. He's got quite a history. And here you go. Welcome, Mike. How are you?
Thank you, Mark. It's really an honor to be with you and just be in the company of Willie G and Little Ray and El Chicano and Amber Tones and Mark and the Escorts and all of those guys that we all knew as friends, and many of us grew up together during the 60s and 70s. So it's great to be here.
So you started out with the was it called Mickey and the Cavaliers?
Yeah, it was the Cavaliers. It was my dad used to manage the band. I started when I was 10 or 12. My dad parents had me in guitar lessons, and so it kind of evolved from a solo act, me singing by myself, and added a couple other guys. And I always had guys that were older than I was because I was 12, 13. They were 16, 17 already in high school.
Yeah.
So my dad managed the band. He came up with Cavaliers.
And you had been taking some guitar lessons or music lessons early on, right? Which kind of gave you a little.
Yeah, I started when I was 9 from Paul Ravina right there in Montebello. And I took private lessons from Palmer for about 7 years, private lessons, half hour, an hour a week. I took some accordion lessons, some banjo lessons. He was quite well-versed in all musical instruments, just a great musician.
And then, of course, there was the Lou Salter School of Music, huh?
Yeah, I took piano from Lou for, I don't know, a year or two, and he was quite a character right there on Atlantic in East L.A.
I remember that. It was just south of Whittier Boulevard. And I know about it because my older brother, Dan, took piano lessons from him too, way back in the 50s. So I knew that place. And it was there forever, right? I don't know when it finally closed down, but it was there for a long time.
Yeah, he passed away several years ago. I stopped by there and saw that it had closed and read something that he had passed. Yeah.
So the Cavaliers did a lot of gigs and shows. Talk about some of the things you did.
We did. I started off country western, so we did some western venues with some other groups. We did, I did Cal's Corral as a solo. Cal Worthington had a Sunday show, country western show. And so I was on there a couple of times. And then there was Squeak and Deacon radio show out of, I think it was Bell Gardens. And so we did that on Sundays, and then things like that. We actually did a Hispanorama TV show on Channel 13. And this was probably early 60s. We had Nancy Maldonado was in the band, and obviously Hispanic, and she was able to sing Spanish tunes. So we did Solito Lindo, and I worked my way through La Bamba, even though I don't speak Spanish.
Wow. I think you said Channel 13. I think you got the word glitched, but it was Channel 13 KCOP.
KCOP. Yep, yeah. Exactly.
You mentioned Cal Worthington. For those who aren't old enough to know or don't remember, it was a very popular country western show. But Cal had a car dealership, and he used to make those crazy commercials. I'll even eat a bug to give you a deal,
Yeah, very nice. He was always at the shows. And I mean, he had some really fine talent. I mean, Jerry Lee Lewis was there, wow. Marty Robbins, Jim Reeves, all of these guys were at his show. Wow. So it was a great time to grow up.
And what was that Auction Village you said you played with the Cavaliers?
No, Auction Village was over in Baldwin Park, and it was just what it was. It was an auction center, and there were usually 3 or 4 different auctions going on every evening. And the little colonel, who was the owner, started a talent show. So we would have a talent show on Thursday evenings, and people would bring their relatives and family because the winner was through applause. So my parents would bring 2 or 3 carloads of family and friends. And, every weekend I would win. I think I got $7.50 for first place, which was big bucks back then.
That's right, baby.
And he pulled me aside one day and he says, you keep winning. Says, how about if I put you on a Sunday, give you an hour for yourself, and I'll pay you $15 for the hour. And I'm thinking, geez, I can't do an hour by myself. So I got a few guys together, and that was the first band, Mickey and the Cavaliers.
And that's how it formed. Wow. So eventually, Mickey and the Cavaliers evolved into Mickey and the Invaders. And how did that happen? How did you pick the name Invaders?
Well, I think we kind of outgrew the Cavaliers. Kind of a hokey name. Yeah, I always thought it was hokey. I didn't tell my dad because I didn't want to feel bad. But I always thought so. We thought, well, how about the Invaders? That was space was a big thing going on, and so he said, well, how about the Invaders? And so then he said, well, Mickey and the my dad was always promoting me. Well, we got to have it Mickey and the Invaders, or Mickey Aversa and the Invaders. So that's how that evolved.
And on the band card, it said "Music Out of This World."
Yeah, that was my dad's.
He was quite the promoter. So you mentioned the members of Mickey and the Invaders at the time. I have them here, but you could probably do them from memory.
Yeah, well, the first group was let's see, Dave Irwin and Eddie Matisoff. I think Don Vina might have been playing drums. That was Palmer's son. Then we got Denny Robinson. There was and his sister Linda. There was a group called the Gray Family, and Lonnie Gray and his sisters were part of the group. These people kind of worked their way in and worked their way out over a 2-year period or so. Sonny Lathrop was also out of Downey.
Was Simon Casas the bass player? Did he come in a little later? He wasn't right at the
beginning. He came in about 65, I want to say. We met Simon at the Monterey Park Teen Center. Okay. And found out he played bass. Dave Irwin, who was the bass player, left the group. He was not really interested in a music career. And ran into Simon. Oh, I'm a bass player too. He was singing with a buddy. And so that's how Simon joined the group.
And he stuck with you through that whole ride. The people I have here that I interviewed you years and years ago for an article on my website. And what I have here is you on guitar, Simon on bass, Sonny Lathrop guitar, Denny Robinson guitar, Linda Robinson vocals, Barry Ward drums, John Ortiz sax, and Mario Sosa trumpet. And it says drummer Barry Ward would later play with Three Dog Night.
Well, what happened there was during I think it was 1967, we had met Dick Biondi, KRLA disc jockey, and he asked us to become the roadshow band. For KRLA. So we would do some high school gigs during the week at the high schools and became the roadshow band. So then he says, hey, I got an opportunity to do a Job Corps tour, 2 weeks, need a band, going to bring some musicians. And so we did that along with a guy named Chuck Oberon, who was actually Chuck Negron from Three Dog Night. This was all pre-Three Dog Night. So about 3 or 4 months after the tour, I get a call from Chuck. Hey, Mike, can I get in touch with Barry? Little did I know he's looking for a drummer for Three Dog Night.
He stole him.
Yeah. So Reb Foster was the band manager at the time for Three Dog Night, putting the group together. And so obviously Barry left the group, and we went with a couple other drummers in the interim. I don't know whatever happened. Barry lasted about 6 months. And before they even did their first gig and stuff like that, Barry was let go.
Wow. Now, an important thing to interject here is somewhere along the line with Mickey and the Invaders, Bobby Espinoza, later famously keyboard player for El Chicano, was in your band. And you met him through Salter. And talk about how Bobby wound up in the group.
We wanted to augment the band a little bit, because we were strictly guitars. And then we had John came in on sax, but we wanted a keyboard. And so I mentioned to Lou, I said, Mr. Salter, I said, you have any students that might, fit the bill? And he says, I got one young boy, and his name's Bobby Espinoza. He comes in with his mom, brings him faithfully, and he's been coming for years. So that's how we met Bobby. And he had I think it was a Vox or a Farfisa. I can't remember which one he had, but he had one of those early keyboards, and we started playing together, and that's how that happened.
I think you said that he was a pretty shy guy at the time.
Oh man, he was a quiet young boy, and I think he was a little self-conscious because he was very tall and lanky. Nice kid, nice mom. His mom was nice and great guy.
So Bobby played with you for a spell, and then he wound up joining the VIPs, and the VIPs were a very popular East LA band at the time, and they evolved into El Chicano in the late '60s, and he went on to make some great records and you know, a fantastic organ player, Hammond organ player then, and
Yes,
kind of was the heart and soul of the sound of El Chicano, you know.
yeah, he really evolved into a great player.
Now, another guy that you had early that went on to other groups is Danny Lamont as a drummer, a great drummer.
Yeah, Danny was with us. You know, one of the times Barry, you know, Barry was a surfer, so Barry was kind of in and out of the band all the time. He didn't show up for rehearsal, and so we said, "All right, we're going to use somebody else." And so Barry was gone, and Danny came in. In fact, Danny is on one of the Salesian Rock and Roll Show recordings with us. I can't remember which one. I think there's one we did a song called Peanut Butter, and I think he's on that album. So Danny was with us, I don't know, maybe a few months, and then some other opportunities came up for him, including the Midnighters.
Yeah, Danny went on to play for a while with the Midnighters, playing on some of their albums, and then he wound up in El Chicano for a while with Bobby Espinosa.
Right.
And of course,
I think Johnny DeLuna passed through our way too, if I'm not mistaken. He did a couple of gigs we did some stuff with Johnny. Like I said, we were needing drummers, and you know, so we had several come in and out.
Yeah, John DeLuna, great drummer. He played with El Chicano on the first few albums. Fantastic.
Yep.
You mentioned Barry went surfing. Let's talk about the surf thing. This is a pretty funny thing, because for some reason you guys got tagged. Mickey and the Invaders got tagged with they're a surf band, and we laughed about it. And when I interviewed you years ago, in fact, I titled the article "Not a Surf Band," or you know, not really a surf band,
right.
Because everybody, I mean, I can mention it today to somebody, and he's telling me, "Oh, the surf band." Okay, first of all, let me clarify this because I can say it for myself. In the early '60s, my band started in 1963, the Escorts. And we started out as a surf band. Literally, 90% of our repertoire was surf instrumentals. Wipeout, Pipeline, you know, Dick Dale, Miserlou, all that stuff. And that was what was happening at that time. And there were a lot of East LA groups that went through a surf phase. And there was the Vesuvians, and various groups were doing surf stuff, dressing with, you know, those kind of like Beach Boys kind of shirts. So it was in, and you guys went through a phase of that, and you got tagged with it. But you guys were like musical chameleons, because you could be a surf band and play at the Rendezvous Ballroom with Dick Dale, and then you could play an East LA wedding and do all the R&B and all the East LA stuff, and then you could do standards and play at a bar mitzvah or something, right? So talk about that.
Yeah, we got the funny thing is that 1965, somehow I got involved with a recording. My dad met some guy in Hollywood, had a record label called Lap Records. He needed a vocalist for a real pop bubblegum tune, Land of Broken Hearts. And the tracks were already late for that song. They had the background vocals and the tracks laid. They just needed a teeny bopper voice. So I went in and did the voice. He said, but you know, before we can release it, we need a flip side. And I said, well, I got this song called Blast Off. It's an instrumental. So we all went into the studio, recorded it. That became the flip side. That is the song that everybody recognized us for. And I didn't realize it until the early 80s. Bob Daly, who wrote a book called Surf Bands of the 60s, calls me and says, hey, I want to interview you about your surf song. I go, what surf song? He goes, Blast Off. And so then the lights started to go on and then everything kind of clicked. And I go, oh, wow, okay. And so that it even kind of fortified that title more, because we were put in that band as a surf band.
And it says here that in 1996, a book came out called Surfing Guitars by Robert J. Daly. And they mention you guys in there as a surf band there too.
Yeah, we have 3 or 4 pages. He did a nice article. We have photos in there, some posters. He revised it several years ago and did some color things, which were nice. So yeah, so it's been around for 20 years.
Yeah. So you lived in Montebello, right?
Yes, most of everybody that was in the band was from Montebello or Monterey Park.
Yeah. So for everybody out there that doesn't know, So East LA is a complicated thing. East LA was an unincorporated area, just east of the LA River, east of the bridges coming over from downtown LA. And there's all those districts like City Terrace and Lincoln Heights and Boyle Heights. And, that's East LA. There's a sheriff's department. It's not a city, but Montebello is right next door. So even though it's a different city, it's considered East LA. There's the unincorporated East LA, and then what I call the greater East LA area, which could include Pico Rivera, El Monte, San Gabriel. A lot of Chicanos, a lot of the East LA bands lived in those areas. So you were there in Montebello.
Yes.
Now, when you played the East LA venues, you played all the venues that I did and everybody else did from that era, the Big and Little Union Halls, Montebello Ballroom, Kennedy Hall, and you guys even played El Monte Legion Stadium?
Yeah, there was some big event over there. I can't remember. It's like a flash, talking about this stuff. It seems like another lifetime sometime because it's been 50 years ago. But that was a tough gig because the place was so massive and we were lined up behind other bands and it was such a hassle. But I remember we were there and it was one of those gigs where they were doing a big show, rock and roll show.
Yeah, for some reason, my band never played there, and I never even went there. So it's this mythical place to me, and so many people did play there. But when you played the East LA circuit, the venues that I just mentioned, you played the typical stuff, right? The R&B, the doo-wop. You might have covered some Midnighter songs or whatever.
We did all of that stuff that was popular, pop songs, of course. No surf music, that wasn't on the list, but we do the typical songs that everybody else was playing at the time.
Now, how did you wind up playing bass on Little Ray's classic record, I Who Have Nothing? Fantastic record. And what happened?
Well, I had played, I'd been a guitar player, and my parents bought me a bass because I was taking lessons from Palmer. And, he said, you start dabbling around. So I got a bass and I started playing a little bass and it was a cheap, I don't know if it was a Magnetone bass, something like that. And so I did play bass, and it's just, as you know, it's an extension of the guitar. You know how to play chord structures and scales, you can play bass. And so I developed my own style and played. So I can't even remember what night it was of the week, but I get a call and it's late. 11, 12. Mike, it's Ray Jimenez. Yeah, Ray, what's up? He goes, we're at the studio, and they were in a studio in LA somewhere, I believe. And he says, my bass player didn't show up. We're getting ready to record. Can you come down and join us? I go, oh, wow, a chance to play with Little Ray. I says, you bet. So I jumped in the car and drove down there and played the session.
Wow. And I think the band that was backing up was the Progressions, his band, the Progressions, right?
I can't remember. Yeah. I can't remember. It just said, here's the tune. I said, oh yeah, I bet he knew the song. Very popular song.
Did Ray sing live with the track, or did you guys do the track first? Do you remember?
No, I don't remember that. Yeah, I don't remember.
And did you record it? Do you remember where it was? Was it Bob Keane Studios somewhere? Bob Keane, Delphi Records. I think it came out on Donna Records first, and Bob Keane, who I discovered Richie Valens, was the one who was recording that. That's a great record, and I love that.
I don't even have a copy of it. I've tried to get copies of stuff that I was involved in. That's one that I've not been able to find.
I can send you an MP3 if you don't have one, but
yeah, that'd be nice. Yeah, I wouldn't mind that. Thank you.
But Little Ray, he was one of the great singer performers of East LA, probably the premier singer / performer. That guy was like James Brown, Jackie Wilson, Stevie Wonder, Smokey Robinson rolled into one.
Real honor.
Yeah, and he's still singing great, by the way. So then what happened next? So let's talk about some of those Dick Biondi shows that he took you on, the KRLA DJ. He took you on you got to back up some incredible artists.
Yeah, we were, some of those artists that we came across were at some of the big roller rinks. The Skaterama over in Downey used to be a big place in the mid-'60s. There was a skating rink over in San Gabriel. So they used to have these big dances. I mean, not only skating rink, but then they'd have these big rock and roll dances.
Did you ever do the skating rink in Pico Rivera? It was called the Bel Air
Oh,
Velodrome. Oh yeah, do
yeah,
you remember
never.
it though?
Yes, I do. Yep.
Yeah. Well, we played there one time, Mark and the Escorts. We were on the bill with the Blendells, and that was really
Okay.
cool. And
Yeah.
we loved the Blendells, and that's when they had their hit "La La 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 La."
Oh, yeah. We were with Sonny and Cher at the Pavilion Ballroom. Righteous Brothers were at Skaterama and Downey. And, you think about it now, here were these big artists in these small venues. Maybe there was 400 or 500 kids out there. But this was the 60s, and that's kind of the way it was done.
Yeah.
And it was really a trip. Nobody had cell phones, so we don't have pictures of that.
I
It'd
know.
been nice
And
photos.
no video. You also backed up Brenda Holloway, Johnny Burnett, the rockabilly guy, Brenton Wood, Paul and Paula. Hey, Paula.
Yeah.
April and Nino Tempo, and the Blossoms. And then you really befriended the Blossoms. They dug you guys, and you wound up doing some shows with them, right? Darlene Love,
Yes.
and those ladies, yeah, who sang with the Crystals and all that.
Yes.
And
whose career has really made has been regenerated lately. I mean, she's really, because of that documentary that came out.
20 Feet from Stardom.
Right.
And she got into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame deservedly. And
Yes.
she sang on my first solo record in 1971.
Oh, really?
I did a record for Lou Adler and his Ode Records label, distributed by A&M. And he had produced the Mamas and the Papas and Carole King. And I did a single with him as a solo artist with 2 of my songs that I had written. And I got to have the guys from the Wrecking Crew. I had Hal Blaine on drums, Joe Osborne on bass.
Oh, yeah.
I had a string section. It was an amazing situation. But we also had Darlene Love, Mary Clayton, and another lady singing background. So, yeah, so I have that connection with Darlene Love there. But you guys played with them, the Blossoms, a lot of places, including Palm Springs at the Chi-Chi Club. And I live out in the Palm Springs area. And I remember that place. So tell me about
that. And that, what a gig that was. We were there for a week with the Blossoms, and it was like a dinner house show club. And we drove in. We didn't stay. I mean, here we are, poor musicians. So we drove in from Montebello every night, did the gig, went home, came back, and they went bankrupt. We never got paid for that gig.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Now, were you backing the Blossoms as Mickey and the Invaders still, or had you changed your name?
Actually, we were the Mike James Quintet at that time. Between the Invaders and Dyna-Might, for maybe a year or two, we were known as the Mike James 5 or Mike James Quintet.
Before Dyna-Might?
Yes.
Okay. By the way, before we jump ahead too, you also played, I have here, you played the Pasadena Civic Auditorium on the bill with the association.
They weren't there at that time, but they played there, I think, the week before.
Oh, I see.
We did stuff with Joey Page over there. Joey was the Everly Brothers bass player, and then he had a solo career. So we backed Joey up a couple times over there at
my band, my mid-60s band, the Men from Sound, we played there one time at the Pasadena Civic, and I'm guessing it was around 68-ish, because I remember we were doing like Cream songs, Sunshine of Your Love, all that stuff. The psychedelic period was happening. And on the bill with us was a group called the Fraternity of Man, which was kind of like a Mothers of Invention kind of far out. I think they might have had a song called Don't Bogart That Joint, My Friend, or something like that. But and then you guys played at Disneyland. Was that Mickey and the Invaders?
Yes, that was Mickey and the Invaders. That was 1966, I believe. And we did a couple of weeks there. And it was a lot of fun. It was, that was a gig my dad got us and auditioned, of course. And it was, that was before, Disney is a lot harder to get into now than it was back in the 60s. So,
right.
But it was fun. Yeah.
Now, what about the Factory in Beverly Hills? It says there, the Mike James Quintet, you played there and you were on the bill, or you backed, did you back them? Well, no, it says, no, the people in the audience were celebrities like James Mason, Omar Sharif, Martha Ray, Dick Smothers, Barbara Feldon of You know, what's the song, that funny show, Get Smart
Get
show?
Smart. Yeah.
Um, who else is here? Ricky Nelson and Hugh Hefner. There's quite a lineup of you that were dancing to your music.
Yeah, it was in Beverly Hills on Lapeer Avenue, and it was basically what it was an old factory, and they turned it into this very exclusive nightclub, and it was owned by oh gosh, I want to say Peter Lawford and some other big time investors, and it was a dinner house. And we'd come in, we play some quiet dinner music to begin. And after dinner stopped about 10 o'clock or so, then we began to do more dance music. Never forget one night, and I mean, within arm's reach was Omar Sharif, uh, Ben Casey, the guy played Ben Casey, and James Mason sitting in front of us eating dinner. On the right,
Vince Edwards. Vince Edwards was Ben Casey.
Ricky and Chris Nelson walked in. They were on the right. Hugh Hefner was on the table on the left. And then we did a New Year's Eve event for them. And comedian Jack Carter hosted. And we played along with Eddie James Olmos and the Pacific Ocean.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So was it a little intimidating when you're playing and you see Rick Nelson down there and various musicians? Was it a little weird?
Oh, yeah, it was, most of them were very nice. Ann Southern, I walked past her one night and she goes, "Oh, hi there. How are you doing?" Very friendly. Some of them were a little bit more, apprehensive. She was very sweet, very nice. We were told not to talk to the people.
Ann Southern had the show Our Miss Brooks when we were growing up, sitcom.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. I played in front of Rick Nelson one time, and this was like in 1970. I was in a pickup group. They said, "Oh, come on, play guitar." And we just showed up thinking it was a dance at Antelope Valley College, and we were opening for Rick Nelson and the Stone Canyon Band. And
oh my goodness,
we were unrehearsed. I was freaking out. And we're playing, and Rick Nelson and Randy Meisner, later of the Eagles, who had already been in Poco, were leaning against the wall watching us. And I'm going, "Oh my God, I wish I was playing with a rehearsed band," But it's a little daunting experience.
Gotta love those memories.
Yeah, memories. So then some more DJs became your managers, Charlie O'Donnell and Humble Harv. Isn't Humble Harv the one that wound up in a murder thing?
Oh, yeah, that's unfortunately, when Dick Biondi, late 60s, they had a big shakeup at KRLA. They let a lot of disc jockeys go. Dick Biondi was one of them. And we'd become very close with Dick because we had done a lot of things for him. He says, "I'm going to introduce you to a couple of buddies. They've got a new record producing company." And it turned out to be Charlie O'Donnell, Charlie O, who was a host for Dick Clark for many years on American Bandstand, and Humble Harv from KHJ. So they were looking for bands to kind of pick up and work with.
Okay. Now, before we get on to Dynamite, I want to touch on another thing that's important. We talked earlier, I try to be chronological here, but we don't have to be. This is East L.A. music stories. We tell the stories.
Yeah.
I think we should talk about when you did those surf venues as Mickey and the Invaders, like the Rendezvous Ballroom was a very happening place. And didn't you play on the bill with the great Dick Dale?
Yeah, we played on actually a car show with Dick Dale also. I think that was Costa Mesa Car Show or something. And the Rendezvous Ballroom, we used to do the Retail Clerks. That was the union hall for the retail in Buena Park, right down the street from Knott's. And we played with the Chantels, Eddie and the Showmen, Safaris. All the big surf names were there. It was Lively Ones.
The Safaris did Wipeout, which was a huge hit.
Yes.
Yeah, so you guys were a real surf band at that point. But like I said, you could put on different hats and morph into an East LA band or a Barbershop band, whatever it is. But here's a couple of flyers that you guys are on. Yeah. And here's the VIPs. It was Fred Sanchez. Yeah. Fred Sanchez's band that evolved into El Chicano later. And we got, who else? There the Ambertones, the Great Little Ray, Mickey and the Invaders. And I've never seen this before, the Little Exotics versus the Prophets. Now, the Exotics were one of our rival bands. They were also at Garfield High School. We were all 14 years old, 15. And they were the Exotics. I never saw them billed as the Lil Exotics. It's kind of interesting. And the Prophets were a really good band. I think maybe John DeLuna played with them too. They had some pretty amazing
Yes.
musicians in their
Yeah,
band.
they had a sax player that Dave Parsley was the sax player.
Mhm. And anyway, getting back to this, Heidi Ho was a promoter. They were the people that did the Little Union usually. Sam Nevada was the guy's name. And it says January 22nd, 1966, 7:30 p.m. to $AM. Ooh.
Yeah.
San Gabriel Boulevard. Just minutes from East L.A., it says. Donation $2. And there you go. Oh, we also have to mention the, well, let's show this flyer first. It's Heidi Ho again. So Christmas Day dancing show, VIPs, Amber Tones, Mickey and the Invaders, and the Prophets.
Yes.
The Little Union Hall.
Right.
And that's dated December 25th, 1965.
Wow.
Yeah. So that's another one. But I was going to say, you guys, was it Mickey and the Invaders that played the Teenage Fair at the Hollywood Palladium?
Yeah, so it was 1967, I think.
You guys won.
We played the year before, did not win. Came back again. It was over 150 bands in the competition that played over a week-long show, the Teenage Fair. And we got down to the last few bands on the Sunday evening, and we won first place. And it was quite an honor. Very nice.
Yeah. Wow. What did you win? Do you remember?
You know, we got a gift certificate for $400 worth of Fender musical instruments. Nice. So we got a Fender PA system at the time. And then we got a nice try. I still got the trophy out in the garage. It's a little tarnished and beat up, but it's I still have it. Yeah.
You know, we're a little tarnished and beat up too. So 50 years later.
Yeah.
So anyway, getting back to, I think, did we cover Mickey and the Invaders so we can get on to Dynamite? Do you think we got all that?
Well, I think they're done.
So now you have these new managers, and they help get you a major record deal with MCA Records. One of their subsidiaries was Uni.
Yes.
And
we
Neil
started
Diamond
with them on the Congress label, though. Congress was
another subsidiary
label besides Uni, right?
Okay.
And that was the label, the Name Game. What was her name that had the song The Name Game?
Yeah, 5
that
5
was on
5 Banana Fana 4 5 Fee 5 The Name Game. Okay, all right. So it was another subsidiary. In 1969, I had a band called 1984, named after the George Orwell book, and we did 2 singles for MCA Records, the Cap label, KAPP. So they had
right.
They had Uni, and El Chicano wound up on Cap a year later with their big hit Viva Tirado.
Right.
So you guys were on MCA, and that's where you guys came up with a different name. And how did that come up?
Charlie and Harvey were saying, we can't use Mike J. We got to come up with something catchy, and Harvey actually came up with the name. He goes, "How about Dynamite? DYNA-MIGHT, Dynamite." Yeah, it sounds good to us, and that's how that came about.
Mm-hmm. And do you remember some of the members of that group at that time? I know Simon was still with them, wasn't he?
Yeah, by that time we were pretty locked into the same 5 guys. That was Barry Ward on drums, Simon Casas on bass, John Ortiz on sax, and he was playing some keyboard at that time. He had a Hammond, Mario Sosa on horns, trumpet, and then myself on guitar and vocals.
And your first single was You Got Me Groovin' and Soul Has No Color. What right. Those songs?
I wrote one, and John wrote Soul Has No Color. John had a very strong, unique falsetto voice. So, he had kind of a Michael Jackson type voice, real high. And so that song is Soul Has No Color, was very relevant at the coming out of the 60s with all of the chaos and the black and the white thing. So, I'm surprised that song didn't do more than it did. You Got Me Groovin' was kind of an R&B, strong horns, very catchy tune. we were starting to get some airplay down south. We saw, the trade papers, here's a star up and coming song. And about that time, MCA got this new guy from England that came over, and they started putting all of their money and resources and promotion behind some guy named Elton something.
Oh my God. Oh geez.
So Elton John came in right in the middle of our uni experience or MCA experience, and everything was just put on him.
Well, that's what happened to me. That's what happened to me with Lou Adler and Ode Records. I was right in the middle of Carole King's Tapestry, for God's sakes.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
I didn't get too much attention at that point. So that was released. That single was released in September of 1970. And then you came out with a second single, and one of the songs was called Borracho, drunk.
Borracho.
Latin group.
Yeah, Viva Torado had just been made hit, was big and popular, and Charlie or Harvey said, man, we need something to kind of, that kind of Latin beat. And so came up with wrote Borracho, and Harvey said, hey, how about if we do Borracho? And that's Harvey's voice, Harvey Miller's voice on the song.
Oh, yeah. Okay. It says here that it had a Hammond organ on it, like El Chicano.
Yes. Right. Yeah. And that song's been actually covered several times. It's still on playlists, disco playlists over in Europe.
Wow.
It's on a couple of disco CD compilations in Europe. And then a New York Hammond B3 player contacted me about 2018, I think it was. He says, Mike, I want to put Borracho on my album. Great Hammond B player, Jeremy Baum. Wow. And he did. So it's been covered several times by other artists.
And did you write it, or the whole band wrote it?
I wrote it. Yep.
Okay. And then it said you had a third single, Sunshine Goddess, written by my friend, the late Alan O'Day.
Yeah.
And A Message to My Brother, the B-side. Yeah, Alan O'Day famously co-wrote Rock and Roll Heaven, Righteous Brothers, Angie Baby for Helen Reddy. He had his own hit, and I got to think.
Yeah, he did.
His hit was Undercover Angel.
That's right. Yes. Remember we did a gig with you over in the brothers' birthday party.
I'm glad you remember that. Yes. Okay. So, and it wasn't that many years ago. What, 6-7 years ago? It's hard to say these days. But a while back, our mutual friend Joe Ortiz. Did you know Joe Ortiz?
Yes.
Joe Ortiz was a radio guy. He was one of the first. I think he was the first Chicano to have a talk radio show at KABC, like a major political, issues related talk show. And he had a TV show that I actually played on in 1971 or 72. He was the host on Channel 11 or something. But he was also a PR man, and helped a lot of Chicano musicians. Yeah, good guy. Helped a lot of Chicano musicians and actors and give them PR and reduced rates, whatever. But he was friends with Alan O'Day because when they were teenagers, they had a band together. Alan O'Day grew up out here in Indio, California, which is heavily Chicano and Mexican. And so Alan O'Day, an Anglo guy, was in a band with a bunch of Chicanos playing in India growing up. So he's very hip. He was very hip to all that stuff. And Joe and Alan stayed friends throughout the years. So Joe Ortiz was giving a birthday party for his daughter who had just turned 21. Right. And I don't know how we wound up, but he called me up, he called you up, and we showed up and we were the band. It was Alan O'Day, me, you. Well, I think he was original bass player and drummer maybe. And but it was a band.
Mike O'Brien, wasn't Mike on keyboards?
Maybe he was. We'll have to ask Mike. Mike, I might know he watches a lot of these shows. He might have been.
Yes.
Yeah. And Mike played with you in which band?
Agape Brothers.
Okay, and that was
actually, he played the last 6 months with Dyna-Might before we completely dissolved in 1977, late 77, 78. And then we got together for the Agape Brothers. Yeah.
Which was like a Christian group.
Christian, yes.
Okay. And Mike O'Brien also played with my good friend Anthony Beret, who had the Emeralds. Yes. He had a band later on. I think it was called Energive. and
Yes.
Brian played with them too. So it's a small
Yes.
world, you know.
You bet.
So where were we about Alan O'Day? So we played that party, and it was funny because we were all probably in our 60s or something, and
Yeah.
so we started calling ourselves Los Geriatrics,
Yeah.
and then we were also the Phlegm Tones, the Phlegm Tones.
Yeah.
We had fun. We rocked out. It's kind of fun.
Yeah.
Good old Alan O'Day, he passed away several years ago, but great guy, great songwriter. Wrote a lot of songs for a lot of big artists. So, so then what happened with the MCA deal? So you did 3 singles, and what happened with Sunshine Goddess by Alan O'Day? And how'd you get the song, by the way? The Alan O'Day.
It was a song that Charlie and them came up with. They were looking for some material for us. And the funny thing about it was we went into the studio. The studios and the recording companies are there. So we went into it. Studio did the song. Russ over there at MCA.
Russ
I
Reagan.
can't remember Russ.
Russ Reagan.
Exactly. Yep. And he didn't like my voice. He said, whoever made those decisions, didn't. He says, it's too rough, too hard, too this. So one of the other guys, the guy that wrote the flip side message to my brother, was a singer, and he did the song, and so it's his voice on the song, but it's Dynamite. And I know that stuff goes on all the time. They use extras and bring other people in to do the vocals, and
Right.
it's done all the time. Of course, in between, Harvey had his incident with the law, and we were kind of dealing with that and dealing with the thing with MCA. And we just said, they would have renewed us. Charlie says, I'd get you another year or two. And we just kind of said, let's not. So, and that's kind of when we went, we met Art Brambilla at that time, and we went in the studio with Art just to see what he could do.
Oh, you did too? Did you go into independent studios?
Yes.
Wow, I didn't know that. Okay, for everybody out there that doesn't know. Art Brambilla, who had been working for Capitol Records in the merchandising department, convinced Capitol that, why are you going all over the country looking for talent when we got East L.A. right here with tons of talent? So he got a budget to bring a bunch of bands in and to record at independent studios. And I was one of them. I was a solo artist, but I brought in my band to back me up. It was Tierra, Yaki, the Emeralds, and I didn't know you. You guys had come in too.
Yeah. Yep. And I think we did 6 songs in the studio with him. I still got demos of them, but nothing went any farther than that with that.
Okay. Yeah. And it says here that Dynamite disbanded in 1977. So what did you do after
that? What happened after that? The music business, I don't have to tell you, is tough. It's like a roller coaster, many downs and a few ups, and you get hit hard. And so, we were pretty burned out. We'd been together 15 years, and it was New Year's Eve, 76 to 77. And a nightclub owner, we're at the Round Robin in Glendale, and the nightclub owner says, come on, let's bring in the new year with a shot. And we said, here's to 1977. And Barry said, yeah, well, good luck, guys. I'm not going to be with you. I'm leaving the band. I'm leaving the business.
Mm-hmm.
And that was kind of the first blow. That was the first nail in the coffin. And quite frankly, John Ortiz and I'd actually been just searching my soul and my spirit for a new direction myself, because, here I am, I'm approaching 30.
Ooh.
And, and that's pretty heavy, and I'm still fighting the fight. And so I turned my life over to Jesus Christ at that time, became a Christian, started going to church. And it was shortly after that Simon gave his notice, said, Barry's leaving. I'm going to go ahead, and it's a good time to bow out. So Simon left the band early 77. John and I were living together at the time. We looked at each other and goes, you know what? Let's just completely start new. So we completely broke up the band because there were a couple other guys involved besides Barry and Simon. And Nick Bradley was one on keys and Mario Sosa. So we started a new band. Got a great drummer out of Arizona and a great young keyboard out of Chicago. Sal Hernandez on bass. He was with a local rock band, a local club band, Sal Hernandez. Really good guy. And so we did Dyna-Might too. And as Christians, John and I worked clubs for a whole year in 1977. Yeah.
Oh, cool. Hey, you know, we forgot a really important story, and that is that whole Hamilton, Joe Franken Reynolds situation.
Yeah.
Let me preface it with this. You know, I've done interviews, Zoom shows with two members of the group. Remember Elijah? Previously, they were the Evergreen Blues.
Oh, yeah.
Well, when they were the Evergreen Blues, another Montebello band, they recorded Midnight Confessions, that was written by their manager. And they made the record. It came out on Mercury Records. It was getting some airplay. And all of a sudden, the Grassroots recorded it, but copied their version note for note, lick for lick, horn arrangement, lead vocal chops, identical. And they got the hit. So that was tough on Elijah. I mean, on the Evergreen Blues to have to suffer that. And now this is kind of similar with you. What happened? You tell that story.
Well, Simon Nava was a conguero that we knew, and we were kind of looking for some music, and he was kind of working with Hamilton Joe Frank, and of course Hamilton Joe Frank and Reynolds had a couple of hits. You know, they were kind of one hit type band, and they were doing some local clubs and stuff. And he says, you know, here's this song here that they did. So we heard it, and so we went ahead and. Stupid us, you know, we're not thinking ahead. We should have got the rights from them before we did anything, but we didn't. We said, let's go in, make a demo. We pressed a few copies, put a song on the flip side. It found its way to Playboy Records. Playboy Records says, hey, we really like this, but you know what? You got to get the mechanical rights from Hamilton, Joe Frank, and Reynolds, from the writers. And I'm thinking, and so we had paid for the demo and everything ourselves. We weren't going to put any more money out. I figured Playboy Records wants to release it, let them pay it. Well, they passed on the deal. We said, all right, that's it. We'll sell copies at the nightclubs, which we did for years. Next thing I know, a year later, Hamilton, Joe Frank, and Reynolds come out with Falling in Love Again. Completely different arrangement, very schmaltzy and, you know, kind of a love song, and we had kind of a hard horn section, and they got a gold record out of it.
Now, was it recorded on Playboy Records, or what label were they on?
And Playboy, yeah, the guy from Playboy Records actually went to them. He liked the song so much, contacted them directly, worked the deal with them, and it was released on Playboy Records.
So if you hadn't picked up that demo and recorded it, they probably would have never had that hit.
No.
Yeah, that's showbiz, baby.
I never got a thank you in the mail either. That's all right.
And speaking of Playboy Records, Yaki, after doing that Brambilla thing, wound up with Playboy Records. Their album came out on Playboy. And Tierra wound up on 20th Century Records with Russ Regan, and I wound up on Capitol Records and having two singles out on Capitol. But wow, I didn't know you guys were doing recording with Art too. I missed that. So then you eventually wound up in the business of estate sales, right? And you're doing that to this day?
Yeah, well, the Agape brothers were together about 3 or 4 years. We met Mike O'Brien. He was from another local band, Energive. He played with Energive, and Don Hoover was the drummer. And actually, Mike also became a Christian at that time. So in 1977, we're sitting in a church in Whittier called My Friend's House. Pastor Jim Ortiz and his wife Yoli were the pastors there. And we're sitting in a church, and Jim says, let me introduce you to this other guy. And so he brings Mike O'Brien over and says, this guy's a musician too. And we look, said, oh yeah. And Mike looks at us, go, I know these guys. And so we kind of, so it kind of formed this trio. And then we brought Don Hoover in on drums. And we wrote we did an album together called the Agape Brothers. That was released in 1978, June of 78. And it was pretty much all original material. And the other two guys, John and Mike, went on to be pastors, and eventually the band disbanded. But you know, we did a lot of victory outreach. We did a lot of street ministry. We were actually on the corner of Ford and Whittier Boulevard on Sunday nights, preaching and playing music to the lowriders in East L.A.
Oh, the cruising, huh?
Yeah,
Wow.
cruising.
Wow,
So we did
cool.
that for years. We'd go into the barrios in San Bernardino, into East L.A., and play music there. The album we did was engineered by our good buddy Leon Becken.
Mm-hmm. Yes,
Okay.
mutual friend.
Yeah, and it was recorded at Mickey Alsup's studio. Mickey's a guitar player for Three Dog Night. Now, he had a studio in his home in Santa Monica.
I'm recording right now in Leon's studio, Leon Becken's
Oh,
studio.
good. Yeah.
Just finishing up an EP. Yeah,
Oh, good.
still a good friend of mine and of yours too.
Yeah. And it's, you know, we got stuff on YouTube. You know, people want to listen to it. You know, they can go to, I got a YouTube page with a lot of our music, a lot of stuff we did from the old days. Aversa Music. If they go to YouTube and just put Aversa Music, they'll find it. Yeah.
Okay. So you want to say something about the estate sale business?
You know, after I left music, I actually got into corporate life for a while. I worked for Southern California Edison. But, you know, I worked through it for 16 years, and they had an early retirement package in 1996. My wife and I, Sally and I, had been doing antiques and collecting, and we thought, well, that'd be a nice business to get into. So that's what we did. We moved into the estate liquidation and estate appraisal business. So, you know, during all that time, I played on worship teams for 40 years. I've been on various churches, worship teams, played more bass than guitar during those times because good bass players are hard to find in the church. Everybody's a guitar player. But, so I did more bass for the last 30, 40 years in church. Yeah.
So is there anything you think that we missed out on that we didn't talk about? Now here you guys played as a house band at Magic Mountain Dynamite. Was that an interesting experience?
Yeah, that was the opening season, 1971. Yeah, they needed a band, and over 500 bands. I talked to the guy that hired us. And in fact, it was Dick Marks was the guy that was handling the entertainment. Dick Marks is the father of singer Richard Marks.
Oh, okay.
Okay. So Dick Marks was the band director there at Magic Mountain. He was a jingle writer, studio out of Chicago, Illinois. He said, you know, we got 500 bands that want to audition for this. Says, you're the only one that's called my office 10 times. So I called you back first. So we went down to the Union Hall in Hollywood to rehearse. He showed up with a couple other guys. He says, good, we like you. I don't want to listen to anybody else. So they hired us for 2 weeks. We were in the dance pavilion. They kept us for 3 months.
Wow. I remember seeing El Chicano play there around 1971, 71, Magic
Yeah.
Mountain.
Yeah.
So did we miss anything? Anything else you'd like to say about the old days that you can think of? If not, just tell me how you feel about the whole 60s East LA scene that we're all a part of. What did it mean to you? What the experiences? How do you feel about it?
You know, I always loved East LA. It was part of my culture. I'm Italian, but I grew up in a Mexican Hispanic environment. My friends were Hispanic, you know, guys in the band. So it great impact on my life as a person. The music of that time was so important. I mean, I've made friends that I've still got today. I mean, Willie and Ray, Larry Rendon, and Danny Lamont, and Johnny DeLuna, and all these other guys that, you know, we grew up with, Bobby Cochran, and some of these other guys that, you know, you, for instance. I mean, you know, just the list goes on and on and on. The memories, it's like another lifetime, 50, 60 years ago. And if I can detach myself and look back, I say how fortunate and lucky I was to grow up in that environment, in that group, with that group of people.
I feel the same way. And it was amazing how much talent was there and how many bands and how many venues. It was a magical coming together of things that nobody planned it. It just happened.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it was so close to the advent of rock and roll. If you think modern rock and roll around 1956 and Elvis, whatever, we were just 6-7 years after the birth of rock and roll that we were doing it. Nowadays, when people make a band, they've got 60, 70 years to look back on rock history for their influences and things like that. We were right there at the beginning.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, we were. And we're all trying our best to get that #1 hit. It eluded some of us, but, guys like El Chicano and Tierra and some of those guys were fortunate enough, and look at Los Lobos, they're all from, they all came out of that same group and they've all done quite well.
And as far as hits, it takes luck, timing. It takes all kinds of things besides talent. Payola, it's a crapshoot. But we had fun, didn't we? And the hell,
still having fun.
There you
I
go.
still enjoy playing. I get a call for casuals every once in a while. Hey guys, I'm still available. Still got my bass sitting there.
I'll remember that. So
I'd even come to Palm Springs and play with Mark Guerrero if he asked.
Okay. All right. Put you on the list. Hey, man. Well, thank you for doing this. I appreciate it, man.
All right, Mark. It's such a blessing to see you.
Okay, man. I will talk to you next time. I'll let you know when this is up.
Thank you.
Take care.